Hey, FCBC family, it's Pastor Mike here and beyond. This is not just the FCBC family tonight because we are dealing with something extremely critical. This is our 2021 Mayoral Candidate Forum. This is an important election year, maybe the most critical and important election in recent history. And so we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to hear from the candidates. These debates have been one thing, but we want to be able to get into the nuts and bolts of the policy and platforms of the candidates. And we have a great lineup tonight. Tonight we have joining us as candidates, Diane Morales and McGuire. But I'm not doing this by myself tonight. I have an amazing co-moderator. She's a dear friend, a beloved friend. She is Dr. Christina Greer. She's Associate Professor of Political Science and American Studies at Fordham University. She's also the author of a book entitled Black Ethnics, Race, Immigration, and the Pursuit of the American Dream, co-editor of Black Politics in Transition. She can be seen as a frequent commentator on MSNBC, New York One, WNYC. She hosts a podcast, FAQ NYC, and she is also the producer and host of another podcast, The Aftermath and The Contender, both on Ozzy. She is an amazing political mind. I consider her a political guru, and I am deeply, deeply grateful for her joining tonight as a co-moderator in this panel. So family, let's welcome my friend, co-moderator for the night, Dr. Christina Greer. Welcome, Dr. Greer.
Thank you so much, Pastor Mike, and thank you, FCBC family and friends. As Pastor Mike said, I'm Dr. Christina Greer, and I'm so thankful that we have this opportunity to hear from Diane Morales and McGuire this evening to help us contextualize the importance of this election. We know that so many New Yorkers participate when it comes to the presidential elections. When it comes to voting for their mayor and their city council members, we don't tend to show up the way we should. The mayor is in charge of almost 9 million people in this city, a budget of almost $100 billion. That's billion dollars. And that's just for New York City. We know that as Black people, the stakes are high as we're recovering from COVID as a community and as a city, as we're trying to economically recover, as we're trying to think about the rising crime rates, as we're trying to think about how our children will be educated as they go back into the classroom in the next few months. And so all of these candidates who are coming tonight and tomorrow, don't forget to tune in tomorrow, same time, will help us understand their vision for New York City and how they plan to move us forward if they are lucky enough to become the 110th mayor of New York City.
Absolutely. I have to add, the reason why we wanted to do this, and I made this comment on Sunday and I'll make it again. During election season, many elected officials often want to do what I call drive-by politics with churches. They come in, they show up, they give their stump speech and they move on. And it was important that we hosted this forum tonight. And there's some reasons why. I don't know of many churches that have hosted this Mayoral Candidate Forum. But when you think about the church world, the faith-based world in New York City alone, there are 2,000 churches and 4,000 informal places of worship. That is 6,000 churches. That is also not including 1,000 synagogues, over 100 mosques in New York City, right? And here it is. We often talk about New York City being the great melting pot because we have over 800 different languages being spoken. But what people don't realize is that 83% of New York City residents claim to have a religious affiliation. That's a higher rate than the entire state. It comes in at about 70%. So we know that New Yorkers are deeply connected and committed to their religious institutions. And because of that, I think the impact that our faith-based community is extremely powerful. And it's also why we ought to make sure we hear from candidates, not just through debate format, but actually in this kind of dialogue tonight where we can dig deeper so that people can begin to make an informed decision about this election because it is critical. I mean, I don't know how to stress that anymore. And I think you and I have had conversations. This is a major election in New York City, and this is not the time where people can stand on the sideline and observe informed and enlightened decisions.
Right. And as COVID has shown us, it's literally life and death. So shall we bring in the candidates so we can hear about the great, and we don't just have religious diversity in this city, racial and ethnic diversity, we have great ideological diversity within this city. And so hopefully we can hear a lot more this evening from Diane Morales and Ray McGuire.
Good. So without further ado, yes.
Good evening.
Hello there.
Good evening. How y'all getting along?
Hi.
All is well.
All is well. That's what the Humanite woman said. All is well.
Listen, I want to just officially welcome you all and thank you all, because this is important, and it was important that you all accept it. I say that because of the 8 candidates, 5 have agreed to show up, including you two, and that means something, because again, I told the congregation on Sunday, just pay attention, because if the faith community is willing to host a forum for this election, and we have persons who are running who don't think that it's important to be part of this conversation with the faith community, just pay attention to that. And those who are watching, take note of that. It is about how we begin to have those who are running for office see the faith community, based on all the diversity, as an important and impactful institution in our community. So without any further ado, we're going to go right into it, because we want to really give you all an opportunity to express yourself and talk about where you stand. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-moderator tonight, Dr. Christina Greer.
Thank you so much. I wanted to hear just a brief 90-second statement, opening statement from each of you. And this is the FCBC family and extended friends. And so we want you all to speak from the heart. Please don't give us stump speeches. Many of the FCBC community members have seen you all in debates. We want to know how you want to show up this evening and what you want to tell this community. So Diane, we'll start with you.
So much for hosting us, Pastor Mike and Christina Greer, Dr. Christina Greer. It is, I appreciate your comments about the importance of the faith community here in New York City. This is actually my second night in a row speaking to a group of, of members of the faith community. And so I'm pleased and honored to be able to be here. Again, my name is Diane Morales. I am candidate for New York City mayor. I am not a traditional candidate. When I jumped into this race, there was no expectation that I would get this far. I spent a lot of time pushing back against erasure and challenges around my viability. But I jumped into this race actually because I believe that it is really important for all of us to claim a space in electoral politics, and for all of us to claim a space in, running for office and what this means. I am the first generation college graduate, daughter of a Puerto Rican working class family, and I've been a single mom, for over 20 years. I have lived experience that is reflective of much more sort of average New Yorkers than not. And at the same time, I've spent my career working to help folks from our communities, Black and brown, low income, first generation, immigrant, working class members of the community, to access opportunities, to economic stability through education and through job training. And I was pretty successful in that. But the reality of it is that I think I realized that we need someone who actually is an ally on the inside, who believes these things and who also is committed to and accountable to only our communities, not corporate PACs, not special interests. And so, I jumped into this race because I think that I bring that to the table. I have been doing the work in the community for decades. And, it is time for us to actually take on the structural and the systemic issues. As COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated and revealed in so many ways the pre-existing pandemics of racism, of classism, of sexism, of poverty, in ways that I don't think that we can unsee. And we're at the crossroads here. We have an opportunity in 2021 and with the elections to bring in a core of leaders that is actually committed to confronting and taking on and dismantling the structural and systemic challenges that make it possible for our communities to struggle as much as we have struggled. I think it's our time. I think, we need to move past the platitudes of applauding people at 7 o'clock all last summer to actually creating the systemic and policy changes that are going to make it possible for all of our community members to live in dignity. So I'm thrilled to be here with you all tonight and looking forward to this conversation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. And Ray McGuire, would you like to give us 90 seconds of your opening statement?
Sure. Let me give you 90 seconds. First of all, let me acknowledge the faith-based community. I grew up in the church. Church is my foundation. And so it is based on that foundation and this being a walk of faith that I come to this. I came to New York City with 3 things. Based on my mother's sacrifices, my now 95-year mother's sacrifices. I came with a great education. I came with a lot of debt, and I came with no money. And this city's been great to me personally. It's where I met my wife, Krista. We have 3 kids. Leo, who is 8, just finished 2nd grade yesterday. Ella, who's 18, just finished high school. And Cole, who's 20, drafted first round into the NBA. Now the starting point guard for the Orlando Magic. The city's been great to me personally, and professionally, it's been great to me. I came into this world where there were 1 or 2 people who looked like me in the world of finance. So I had to go through conscious and unconscious bias. I had to kick down barriers and knock down doors and climb the ladder. And while I climbed, I also made sure that I extended that ladder to other folks. So based on what I've been able to do in this city and how this city's been good to me, I've been involved in the fabric of this city, in arts education and arts and culture. This city now is at a dangerous crossroads. We're at a dangerous crossroads where a lot of things on the ballot, including our future. We got integrity on the ballot. We got incompetence on the ballot. We got experience or lack thereof on the ballot. We got stop and frisk on the ballot. And we also have defund on the ballot, and the impact that it has on our most vulnerable communities is profound. And the conditions existed before COVID. They've been exacerbated by COVID. And so if I take what I've been able to do in this city and the impact that I've been able to make, I've been a private public servant. I built schools, De La Salle Academy and George Jackson Academy. I built hospitals, Washington Heights. I've supported entrepreneurs and gotten our people compensated, gotten them paid, gotten capital to them. At a moment in time when the crisis of COVID, the crisis of the economy, crisis of safety and justice, and the crisis of education is threatening our viability going forward. It is time to get those who are the gatekeepers of poverty, who've been in office, time to get those out. Those people had their chance. We're watching a bad movie, and we're about to encounter a disastrous sequel unless we step up, which is why I decided to step out and step up. And I'll put my resume up against all of them combined, given the impact I've had and the investment I've made in the community. That's why I'm running for mayor, because I love this city. We need something that's different. We need a change. Otherwise, that movie's going to be bad. It's going to be worse than what it is.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, Pastor Mike, I'm going to start with the first question to our 2 candidates. There's separate questions for each of you. So, Diane, I'll start with you. And I just want to sort of reiterate to both of you that you're speaking to a very highly engaged and participatory Black population of the FCBC community. And so just try and keep your answers as succinct and concise as possible so we can have some follow-ups with you and have a real conversation. So Diane, I'll start with you. The first question is, what is your management style? Mm-hmm. And what skill set do you have that will make you a productive and effective 110th mayor of New York City?
Sure. So, my management style has always been a sort of open door one. I believe in collaboration and co-creation. I believe in bringing the best out in the people that I surround myself with. I believe in surrounding myself with people who I think are smarter than me, quite frankly, because I don't have the need to be the smartest person in the room. And I think there's a lot to be said to the idea of letting people kind of bring their talents to the table. That being said, I think it's also really important to be a leader, to be able to make difficult decisions when required, to be able to take people's input and feedback and, incorporate that to the best of your ability, but make the decision because you have to be ultimately accountable. So, I've always had a real sort of open door policy. And also, I think one of the things I take the greatest pride in is in the notion of lifting as I climb, and the idea of creating leaders from among my team who are then able to go on into, senior roles of their own, because I think that multiplies the effects and the impact of, what we want to do in terms of supporting our communities, because none of us can do it alone. And the more of us that are sort of moving in the same direction with a shared vision of elevating our communities, the better. So I take great pride in the number of people who I have mentored and supported over the course of the years who are now running their own organizations.
Okay. And can you speak to the unionization efforts of your campaign team, and where do those negotiations stand right now?
Sure. So, I fully support my team. I think they are great young activists who had a vision and came on full steam. That being said, one of the things that that has not been clear for them is some of the technicalities and legalities around my campaign, which is publicly funded, significantly publicly funded, and what's called qualified or unqualified expenses and the personal liabilities that come with that. So we've come to a standstill actually because they wanted me to take on some potential personal liabilities that, as a single mom who doesn't have a lot of assets, I just am unable to do and unwilling to do at this point in my life.
Okay. Pastor Mike, do you have any follow-ups before I move on to Ray McGuire?
No, I'm taking it all in.
Okay. So Ray McGuire, we've got a question for you. You've done a few interviews where you've been off script, and that has really resonated with voters. It's resonated with the people you're speaking to. Why do you think you've stayed so close to your talking points throughout the campaign and not really let the voters see the authentic Ray McGuire that people seem to love?
You mean Ray?
Ray on the mic.
Ray on the mic. I didn't know that I'd been off script, but maybe I've been off script. I don't mean to be off script. Listen, I am who I am, right? I come from the neighborhood. And when you get into a world that is a new world, which is a world of politics, you try to make sure that you have, engaged appropriately. And what I now recognize is that there are rules of engagement that have been outlined by people whose sole focus is to stay in office. And I ain't got that focus. I'm an outsider. I'm happy to say more so now than when I began this race. I don't owe anybody anything other than the Almighty and my family. I don't owe any political favors. I ain't in nobody's pocket, no constituency anywhere. So maybe Ray now showing up just because the truth is out and the truth is surfaced. And I see that what I have set out to do is more compelling and more necessary than it's ever been, given the cloud that exists over this race, the incompetence that I'm seeing, the question marks about ethics that I'm seeing. All those things coming into play that have a material impact on the example that we set as leaders in this city. And we simply cannot, as Black and brown people, as a leader of this city, we cannot put forward an example that we have to go and explain to our children when it comes to what kind of example we're set. What is the ethics? Tell me about the ethics. What is the kind of experience that you have? I got a whole bunch of people who promise a lot of things who ain't delivered on nothing. Zero. Unemployment is twice what we talk about the economy. Unemployment is twice the national level. Small businesses are down. City gotten too expensive on their watch. And now they talk about crime. We got violent crime up 200%. And they talk about education. I'm sorry, they don't talk about education. Who's talking about education? That's fundamental to our community, and ain't nobody said anything about it. 7 out of 10 Black and brown kids, 3rd or 8th grade, below proficient. If I randomly take 10 Black and brown boys and girls in the 4th grade, 2, maybe 3 can read. And who's yelling and screaming about it? It ain't happening because these people are boxed into a club about which I'm not a member, and now about which I'm speaking out on behalf of our people.
Well, we'll have plenty of time to talk about education a little bit later. Pastor Mike, you look like you had a follow-up before my next one.
I do. Similar to what we asked Diane, I appreciate your response, Diane, to Dr. Greer's question. Right, it's similar. What is it about your management style and even your leadership skill set that really equipped you for this?
So if I think about when I came into the world of finance, 1 or 2 people in the world looked like me in the world, in the entire planet. And I got to a position of leadership through making certain that I set the example of performance. And I stayed in that job and led a group of people. The larger percentage of them didn't look like me. And I did that for longer than anybody else in the history of corporate America, anybody else. And I led that business for 13 years. I've been held accountable for 13 years. And how did I get to do that? 1, I performed. 2, I made sure that I surrounded myself by the best and the brightest. I had to identify, attract, and retain the best and the brightest to manage out of the depths of a financial crisis, the great financial recession. I did that longer than anybody else. And what you know about that position, it is not an elected position. You got to perform. And if you don't perform, you don't get compensated and your people don't get compensated and you don't stay there that long. So how many people did I lose? Part of my management team in 13 years, direct reports to me, 2. 1 to the UK government and 1 to the US government. That says that those people who put their and their families' livelihood under my leadership stayed with me because they perform. We had goals set out. And what people want, I know about my people is the following. They want to be, they hate to be managed, they demand to be consulted, and they want to be led. In my ability to keep all those people in the depths of the crisis together and lead that business in a way that nobody else had done in the history of the corporate world, out of the depths of the financial crisis, no. The Hollywood content creators ain't got no story like that. That's real. That's fact. That's 100.
So thank you for that. I appreciate that. I wanna. You mentioned something that I think is critical, and I want to ask Diane, and I'll come back to you, Ray. But Diane, a lot of people in our community, part of our FCBC community, and people don't know FCBC is a congregation of over 10,000 members. And New York City, members from Harlem, the Bronx, Queens, and even Brooklyn. So what is a big issue now is crime. You have people who are hesitant to even come outside. I have seniors who are terrified to come outside at night and even during the daytime. So one, how would you approach engaging the NYPD? I ask this question because one of the things in your platform is that you want to defund and decrease NYPD's power. But in order to really address this crime issue that is happening, that's escalating and will continue to escalate this summer, how do you plan on engaging the NYPD, and what kind of detailed solutions do you think can ease the crime wave?
Yep. Thank you for that question, actually. I appreciate it. I know that all of us want to be safe. There's no one in this city who is saying we don't want to be safe. And I know that it is particularly concerning to some folks in our communities and to the elderly and to folks who are experiencing hate crimes, right? Where we're talking about Islamophobia or xenophobia. There's a lot of things to be concerned about. That being said, I think one of the things we also have to recognize is we currently have the best funded resource NYPD police force in the country, if not the world. And so if there was in fact a correlation between policing and safety, we would also be the safest city in the world. That is not the case. And the increase in crime has happened on the NYPD's watch, despite the fact that they are so well funded and resourced. But here's the other thing that has happened as crime has increased. We have failed, our leadership and our government has failed to address the increasing housing insecurity, the increasing food insecurity, the increasing economic insecurity, and the lack of healthcare in the middle of a global pandemic. So I don't think we can decouple the increased crime from all of the other increased insecurities that have been imposed disproportionately, actually, on Black and brown communities. Because we know that while all of this has happened, New York State has generated more millionaires and billionaires than the year before, right? And so as our communities have gotten increasingly marginalized and increasingly vulnerable, the rich have continued to get wealthy off our backs. So what I've called for actually is the creation of a community first responders department. So here's the other thing I know. The NYPD only spends 4% of their time responding to violent crime. The rest of their time is spent either responding to things that are not crime or harassing Black and brown members of our communities. So, the first thing I think we need to address is the other things that they spend time responding to. We know they're spending a significant amount of their time dealing with homelessness, with mental health, and with substance abuse. So a community first responders department would actually be staffed by people who are trained and skilled at intervention and de-escalation, and who would then connect the person in crisis with a larger ecosystem of human service providers, mental health, medical, housing, et cetera, so that we're actually meeting the need of the person in crisis and helping them make progress in their situation. Whereas right now, what happens is, best case scenario, that person gets locked up and released the next day with the same problem, or worst case scenario, they get harmed or killed. So we need to actually get much more sophisticated and nuanced in our responses and provide responses that are appropriate to the situation at hand. And so I'm not talking about decreasing the resources or the support. I'm actually talking about creating much more customized and tailored resources and supports that address the need and move towards actually resolving it and making it go away altogether. And I think that is something that ultimately is going to result in safer communities for us, because we know that when we think about a safe community, we're not thinking about a community that is heavily policed. We're thinking about communities that are rich in resources, programs, and services. And I don't think our Black and brown communities deserve anything less. So that is what I think we should be moving towards so that we can help people live in dignity. If we provide people with jobs that allow them to, take care of their bills, to keep a roof over their head and provide for their families, I guarantee you that the crime rate is going to drop significantly. And that's what I think we need to be doing for our communities.
I want to follow up, because I think sometimes we all know it in politics, narratives drive often the agenda. And there are people who have asked me about this issue and get stuck when they hear things like defund and decrease the NYPD or power, because I think that actually the language for some people who said to me that that's a language of luxury. To be able to say the defund decrease, especially when you are in communities that are quite hostile and the crime is rampant and pervasive. So when you say tailored policing and tailored programming, can you say a little bit more about that specifically to address crime?
Yeah. I mean, I am not suggesting that we don't need police, right? They're still at 4% of violent crime that they're dealing with. And so I think that there needs to be policing to address that 4%. And maybe if they're focused and not dealing with so many other things, they could actually solve more of those crimes, because they're spending 4% addressing it. The percentage of solving it is actually much lower than that. So when I talk about customized and more tailored supports, I'm talking about having someone who has the skills and the resources and the connections to address that mentally ill person, get them to the place where they are ready to accept services and connect them to those services, so that that mentally ill person is then plugged into something that over the longer term is going to help them address their situation. I'm also talking about things like, providing resources in our communities so our young people have things to do, places to go, job training, recreational, social, mental health supports. Those are the kinds of things that actually help to sort of break the cycle, whether we're talking about the cycle of crime, the cycle of homelessness, or the cycle of mental health, mental illness. We actually need to address the root causes of crime and violence in our communities. And policing doesn't do that. Policing is a reaction. And the data shows that it's not actually a reaction that is particularly effective. But we need to actually be, intervening on the front end. So we are addressing more of the structural and the systemic issues and creating long-term sustainable change for our communities that for so long have been disproportionately impacted, not just by the inequities, but by the criminalization of poverty, of being Black and brown, and the criminal legal system that also does our communities so much harm.
Ray, I want to ask you kind of the same question. And you've talked about this, about the high rate of crime that's taking place. We know it is a direct correlation to not even coming out, but the pandemic and some of the socioeconomic realities that Diane mentioned in her statement. What are some specific ways that you would engage this issue around crime and to address the high rise of crime? Because what was said is true. We do need to deal with some of those root causes to crime. But this is not an either or, it's kind of a both and. So while we address the root causes, what are specifics that we would do in terms of engaging NYPD to try to reduce this?
Let me, it is both. It is not and or. Let me be very clear about this. We have to separate this into the following three categories. One, guns and safety. What we're talking about ain't gonna make Grandma and Mamie easier or more comfortable going outside to the grocery. It ain't gonna get Aunt Imogene to go into the subway station so she can go to work. That ain't gonna happen. Not today, because today we need immediate attention. I can deal with the others as we go along here, but today I need to get the guns off the street because the gun violence is up. And what we're talking about here is longer term. Immediately what I need to do is to get those police officers, I need to train them, the highly trained people who can identify where the guns are. We know the top 10 precincts and where the guns exist. We need to get the guns off the street for one. Those people who are felons, who get caught with a legal gun, put them in jail. Those people repeat offenders with a legal gun, put them in jail. We need to put them in jail. We need to use technology like ShotSpotter to make certain that we understand when the shots are fired and where they go and how to deal with that. Get the guns off the street, first priority. And we need to get the mental health care professionals. Let's deal with that now. I'm getting guns off the street. I'm going to refine what's taking place with bail reform. I agree with bail reform, but those people, repeat offenders, shouldn't be getting out by get arrested by breakfast, get out by lunch, and home by dinner. That ain't the way this should go down. Do I need to do that? Number two, I need to deal with those who are mentally ill. Mental health care is more pervasive today than what it's been in quite some time. So I do not want to defund. That's a disaster. I also do not want to stop and frisk. That is a disaster. We know that. So I'm going to deal with those. I'm going to deal with the mental health issues. We have today Kendra's Law, and we have assisted outpatient treatment. Today in the budget, $1.3 million. I'll increase that to about $5 million, which allows those to go who do have medication for us to go and engage those who take medication. And those who take medication with the assisted outpatient treatment are 8 times less likely to return than those who do not. Then I'm going to make sure on the mental health that I return to safe beds. We took 650 to 700 safe beds out of the system, replaced them, taking people to Rikers Island. Number 3, we have assertive community treatment. Those people intervene and stay in regular contact with those people who are mentally ill to make sure they take their medication. Number 4, we need to invest in our schools because our children are today experiencing mental health trauma in ways that we've never experienced. So I need to do that. Mental health care professionals, part of my overall policing plan. Emergency social service, sit within the precinct, sit in the subways to deal with the 4 to 5 of the 10 calls that go into 911 having to do with mental health issues. That is the specific prescription. Now, when it gets to justice and how we deal with policing, we need to make certain the following. I'm going to restructure the NYPD. I'm going to have a deputy mayor for public safety whose job it is to manage the day-to-day NYPD and to be close and connected to the community. Deputy mayor for public safety. Number 2, chain of command responsibility. When one or more officers gets involved in an infraction, the entire chain of command gets held accountable. Number 3, because I've talked about mental illness, developing an emergency social services corps in the precincts, in the subways. Number 4, the CCRB gets full authority to investigate. Rather than take 48 days to look at a video cam footage, it's going to take them 48 hours. They get the file, they review it, they make a recommendation to the commissioner, and based on that commissioner's response, I will have the ultimate say. I may have to take a different direction. Number 5, what I'm going to do is invest in the violence interrupters. Those people on the ground, invest in the community so they can prevent. Number 6, I'm going to get back to community policing, invest in community policing. Number 7, community centers. I grew up, I had a community center. Get people who are in the violence interrupters, those people staff the community centers. Number 8, I need to get people, 7 or 8, I need to get people summer jobs. And I need to invest because right now the summer job, I ain't got no money and it's too expensive to stay where I am. I need to do something. We see this playing out in San Francisco now. They closed down the Walmarts in downtown San Francisco because people didn't have any money, walked in with empty bags and filled them up. That's the direction we're headed. So I'm going to restructure the NYPD. I'm going to invest in the communities, similar to what's been said, and I'm going to get the guns off the street. That's my specific prescription. And you know what? I can do it because all these people talking about defund the police haven't looked at the budget. What's going to cost? It's a $5.6 billion budget. And where does most of the money go? People ask that question, where are you going to cut? I go to
what are you talking about, Ray? That's not true. That's not true.
What do you mean? It is $5.6 billion.
No, it's not. No,
okay, how much is it?
It's well over $10 billion.
No, Diane, you know, Diane, the numbers, let me tell you, the numbers are $5.6 billion. Go check.
No, there are NYPD lines in all sorts of other
Hey. Here's what we'll do. Here's what we'll do for the viewers, is that we will make sure we do a fact check. I'm
going to tell you the facts. $5.6 billion.
Please do, because you will also find that it's really hard to get accurate numbers on the NYPD budget. I know the numbers, Ray.
I'm telling you the numbers. Diane, tell me.
This is my lane.
How much money?
This is my lane.
You know the
This is
number.
my lane. This is my lane.
Okay, well, tell me if it's your lane.
Yes, Pastor Mike. I hear you, Pastor Mike.
Hold on for a second. What we didn't want is this kind of back and forth, because what happens in many of these debates is that when the back and forth begins, it distracts away from the substantive conversation. So we want to make sure we do that. So I want Dr. Greer to come with her question now.
Right, and I just put something in the Citizens Budget Commission. I think both candidates are coming from an angle of the truth. So between the fiscal years of 2020 and 2021, the NYPD budget was decreased to 10.2 billion. But, and that's what Diane is saying, what Ray is saying is the operating budget is now roughly 4.9 billion. It went from 5.2 to 4.9 billion for the fiscal year 2021. So we're
Exactly
talking about
right.
the
And if you
overall
look,
budget
if you look at
versus,
the line item of those budgets,
okay,
the operating budget.
Hold on,
We got it.
Hold on.
we got it.
Okay,
For
but
the
you can't
FCBC
touch the other part of the budget. You can only
For the
go to the
FCBC
operating budget. So the rest of that stuff
way,
is fiction. Sorry.
That's not true.
we can get a mute button in here real fast. So for the FCBC community, if this is an issue that you really care about, there are some real nuances and ways that the budget has been tweaked, decreased just a touch, and also framed. And it is difficult to get real accurate numbers because we're dealing with the largest paramilitary organization in the city. So my question, though, this is now question number 3. And Diane, I want to be respectful of your time. So if you could keep this answer as concise as possible, we know that you have a hard out at 7:45, and Ray, we know you have a hard out at 8. So Diane, this question is for you. What is your job creation plan for Black and Latinx New Yorkers struggling pre and post COVID? Because we know that quite a few millennials left the city because they couldn't survive financially, but they weren't the only ones who left. And so what is your plan for keeping not just young people and people who've gotten out of college and people who are working, but just people in the city who have had to leave because of the financial constraints due to COVID?
I really appreciate this question, actually, because I think that one of the things that, there's a lot of talk about austerity and budget cuts. And I recognize that 2022, we won't have the same budget that we did in 2019. However, this is not the time to pull back. We actually need to be investing in job creation specifically. And so I have called for several different ways to do that. One is an urban climate core. We need to recognize that the climate crisis is real. We need to recognize that the climate crisis impacts some communities differently and more deeply, and from an environmental justice perspective. And those are our Black and brown low-income communities. So, I've called for the creation of an urban climate core that will prioritize people in those communities to begin to do the resiliency work across the city so that we are actually prepared for the next disaster, because it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. We know that that is coming. I have also called for the investment in what we call the care economy. We've seen over the course of the pandemic, some of the critical positions that make it possible for the rest of us to work: early childhood education, child care, home health care, elder care, disability care. We need to actually shore up those positions, expand those positions, make sure that we are paying those people because they're mostly also Black and brown women in particular, that they're being paid well enough to live in dignity and provide for their families. I have also called for a serious investment in small and mid-sized businesses, because we know that 50% of New Yorkers are actually employed by small and mid-sized businesses. So we should be redirecting the current investments that we provide to large corporations and businesses in the form of tax subsidies and incentives and grants. We should be redirecting those things to our communities and making it possible for our local business owners who we know live in our communities, employ people from our communities, and invest in our communities to strengthen their businesses, expand, and grow. And then I also think we need to be investing in an infrastructure, a good city workforce, which is what I've called it, so that we are strengthening our infrastructure and employing people in the city to do that. That also includes a Green New Deal for NYCHA, where NYCHA residents are being prioritized in terms of creating job creation so that we can invest in the NYCHA infrastructure as well. This is, these are all parts of my new economy for the people, which talks about and focuses on the idea of not just growing back the economy, but growing it back in a new and different way that focuses on and prioritizes our communities, growing from the ground up and from the center out.
Did you want to expand, Diane? Can you define the care economy just a touch more?
Sure. So the care economy, right? When you think about the people who are caregivers in our society, our early childhood teachers, our child care providers, the home health aides that, were traveling across boroughs or travel across boroughs, from their home in Southeast Queens to the Bronx, who are, barely making ends meet, who are Black and brown. We know that as well, who were disproportionately impacted by COVID. We should actually be investing in those jobs and expanding those jobs, because we know that those jobs all make it possible for the rest of us to do our other jobs, right? If you're a mom and you're a single mom and you've got a job, you need a childcare provider. If you are as I am, a sandwich generation and you've got your elders and you need, elder care in your home. Those are the jobs that make it possible for the rest of the economy to sort of to turn and churn. And so we should be investing, expanding, and growing those pipelines and paying them what they're worth. Because right now, so many of the people in those jobs are some of our most vulnerable, who are marginalized, not protected, and just a paycheck or two away from complete economic instability. We need to actually invest there. That's going to directly impact our Black and brown low-income community.
So Diane, you have about 2 minutes. Pastor Mike, would you like Diane to give her closing statement and then we'll continue on with Ray?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Diane, we want to be respectful of your time and we're so appreciative that you spent tonight with us at FCBC. Would you like to have a 60-second closing statement before you go?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the grace in terms of time and my schedule. My ideas are considered radical ideas. I'm okay with that. We are living at a radical time. I'm almost 54 years old, and this moment in time has been unprecedented in my lifetime. We've had all of the pandemics that have compounded our current situation, and we also have this opportunity. It is not a time for us to allow ourselves to be lulled back into a false sense of complacency or to, be satisfied or compromised with incremental change. We have an opportunity to confront the issues that have for so long oppressed and challenged our communities and make a different kind of decision. So I'm not talking about bringing New York City back to normal, because I think I can't unsee the fact that normal wasn't working for so many of us. I think that what is necessary and possible for us at this moment in time is to co-create a new and different kind of future and build a new New York City that can actually potentially live up to the rhetoric of being the greatest city in the world. We can actually lead across the country and the world in terms of what it looks like to focus equity and justice in coming out of this current crisis and, taking care of those who took care of us at the height of the pandemic.
Thank you so much, Diane. I'm so grateful that you came tonight and stayed and had opportunity. So thank you. And thank you for being gracious for your time on tonight.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Stay safe and well. I look forward to seeing you all out there. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay. Ray, I want to, and I know Dr. Gray has, I want to push something because Diane talked about, what she's thinking through with regard to economic crisis we face. You often mention the economic crisis in New York City. Talk to the people who are watching more and in depth about your comeback plan.
So today, people should understand that we're facing an economic crisis. We did get an avalanche of dollars from the U.S. government, form of $5.9 billion. The risk is that this administration uses all of it. And if it does, in fiscal year 23, 24, 25, we'll face a $4 billion budget deficit, which could lead us into bankruptcy, which means that the most vulnerable will suffer the most. My plan is what I call the greatest, most inclusive economic comeback plan in the history of New York City. 500,000 jobs. Go big, go small, go forward. Go big is focused on building deeply, truly affordable housing. It is fixing the fractured bridges and sewage mains. It is managing the 100-year flood that comes every 5 years. It is vocational training. It is making certain that we meet those who are outside of the system with $50 million or so to train them, so we meet them where they are, education, so they can get a job. It is go small. It is focused on 50,000 small businesses where the following will occur: that will take care of their New York City sales tax receipts for 1 year, help negotiate that. Number two, take care of half of their wages for 1 year. Number three, negotiate their credit FICO score so they don't get penalized by what's taking place with COVID. Number four, all fees get waived. Number five, make certain that we have a deputy mayor for small businesses who come in and cut the red tape, a red tape commission plus a shot clock to make sure that we cut through the bureaucracy. Small businesses become customers and clients of the city. Then what I want to do is to make certain that that small businesses going forward is based on the following. In 2020, we spent $22.5 billion of procurement dollars for the city. MWBEs got $1.9 billion, less than 5%. 8 out of 10 of the MWBEs, rather 82%, got zero. And when it comes to Black and brown men and women businesses, They got less than that. And so we need to be intentional. I have a track record of having done just that. Invested in small Black and brown businesses, entrepreneurs, getting jobs, getting capital to them. My plan is to get capital into those businesses. Set up the following. Capital, make sure they get the grants, they get the low interest loans, and they get equity. That's number one. Number two, mentorship in languages that people understand, that we understand. Mentorship so that people will have business plans, who have great minds. I got a lot of CEOs and great business executives in the street pharmaceutical business. I need to get them out of that business and train them, give them the tutorials and the mentorship so they can put business plans together. $50,000 allocated to them, $100 million in a comeback bank that's local, that can identify the entrepreneurs in the neighborhoods, give them the skills, give them the tutorial, and make sure they got a place to convene. So my plan is to restructure and invest in those communities that have been excluded. I want to be intentional here. Many of you recognize the example that we had in Atlanta with Maynard Jackson. Today, Atlanta is one of the communities where you have some of the most well-to-do homeownership in Black and brown communities. I want to, at a minimum, replicate that, modernize that, replicate that, be intentional on how we spend that $22.5 billion. Because today, those who've talked about it have not been about it. And my plan is the following. We've been outside for so long. Black and brown communities have been outside for so long that when they give us crumbs, they want us to feel full. I ain't interested in the crumbs. Matter of fact, I ain't interested in the cake. I want us to own the bakeries. And unless we have that as a goal, we still going to be behind. And I'm not interested in us being behind. Ownership of the bakeries, get the capital, and I got a track record of having done that. That's my plan.
Thank you, Ray. And so part of us owning said bakeries that you talk about starts with education. And I want you to talk a little bit more, and I want to be respectful of your time. So if you could kind of keep it tight, because I know Pastor Mike has one more question for you before we let you go. But I want to know, where do you stand on charter schools? Because many people in the financial sector, of which you've been a leader and a participant, have been strong proponents of charter schools, even though their children attend neither charter schools nor public schools. You've spoken of this Cradle to Career program, but how will you help Black children in public and or charter schools, specifically in your role as mayor? And do you have a school chancellor in mind as well?
So let me be clear about education. The only way I got here, Dr. Greer, is through education and the sacrifice that I talked about. I wouldn't be here otherwise. Education might only ticket out. And it shouldn't be today that our children's lives are determined by their zip codes, which is what it is today. So I want to be clear. I do have a Cradle to Career, but let me address that in the following way. I want the best district schools, the best public schools. I want the best charter schools. I want the best magnet schools, and I want the best parochial schools. I'm in fighting for our children. Now, let me be clear about how bad this is. We pay $26,000 a year to educate a child in New York City. In many of the boroughs, the Bronx District 9 don't have crayons. $26,000 a year. Now, this gets a little different. I'm going to get your reaction to this. We pay $446,000 a year to keep an inmate at Rikers. $26,000, child in New York City, uneducated, not even undereducated, just uneducated, $446,000 a year at Rikers Island. If I take that $446,000 a year and just add $4,000 to it, give me $450 or $54, give me $500,000, and get 10 entrepreneurs today in the street pharmaceutical business and give them $50,000 and train them and educate them on how they become entrepreneurs, the impact of that on the communities is going to be profound. My plan, Cradle to Career, early education, 0 to 4. By the time many of our kids get to pre-K, they're already behind. I want to make sure that we get them early. All of our children are gifted and talented. Early identification of those who may have some challenges. By the end of the 3rd grade, every child in New York City guaranteed can read and do math by the end of the 3rd grade. Why is that? Because between 0 and the end of the 3rd grade, our children are learning to read. After that, they're reading to learn, and we've lost far too many. 6th grade, and so no kid gets out of there, from my account, no kid, not without the ability to read. 6th grade, every child gets business, financial literacy, and digital literacy. 6th grade. 8th grade, we expose them to different career opportunities, vocational training. They can become a plumber, a welder, an astronaut, a botanist, and they get summer jobs. So that between 6th grade, and this is a pathway to career, they get summer job from 8th grade to 12th grade, every summer, paid summer job. So by the time they get to 12th grade and graduate, they can go to that career to which they've been exposed, or 2-year, 4-year college, cradle to career. I've been responsible.
So I've got a quick question, because you guarantee, and Pastor Mike, I want to make sure you get in your last question. But I've got a quick follow-up question, because you said you guarantee this after 3rd grade. So does that mean if our children aren't reading at that level, will they be left back? Or how do you plan to assist those students who still fall behind because of all the other factors that contribute to their lack of sort of educational success?
I don't want them to fall behind, Dr. Greer. I want to make sure that I'm going to have a New York City tutor corps. We can certify college students to teach. I want to have retired teachers. I want to have existing educators to spend the time that is necessary for each of our children to have that basic fundamental education. I don't want to leave a child behind. I don't want to have that slogan, leave no child behind, but I don't want to, listen, I got 3 kids, right? I don't want one of those kids to be left behind. The reason I'm doing this because I don't want our children to be left behind. And what the data shows us today is that we've done that. It's the systemic leave behind. It can't be that I got 3rd through 8th grade black and brown kids and 7 out of 10 of them are not at level. That's systemic. I got 2 to 3 generations of this. And all of a sudden we got COVID and somebody's talking about it. This stuff existed before COVID. Ain't nobody done much about it. Where's the outrage?
Right. Pastor Mike?
Yeah, I want to say something, because oftentimes in these campaigns is an overlooked segment of our population. Rarely do we hear politicians talk about those who live in poverty, those who are underserved. And so staying with this education, because this is critical. There are many people who are watching now, who are part of our community, who do not believe that the opportunities are truly accessible, right? If you do not have access to certain resources. So to those parents, what do you say to them right now? One, who see that our school system is the most segregated in the country, and they feel that getting a quality education is out of their reach, because everything that is being said by those running for office sounds good. But when you speak to those people who are living in poverty, who has limited resources and limited access, how do you create a scenario where they feel like what you're talking about, the opportunity, is accessible and reachable when they're often overlooked because of poverty?
They have been overlooked. I'm not here to tell them any different. The reason I'm running is because they've been overlooked. And unless we get somebody in there who don't owe anybody anything, we're going to continue to be overlooked. That's the real. I don't want to dress this up. It's a bad situation. And the reason I decided to run is so I could go out front and fight for our children and fight for our parents. I want to fight for Pookie and Black Nose Jack and Ray Ray. That's what I'm here to do. So whatever these people are telling them, they ain't fixed it. They ain't fixed it before they start running for office. All of this has happened on their watch. They've been in positions to yell and scream, and ain't nobody yell and scream about anything. I know what it's like not to have. I know what it's like for those parents to struggle. My mama struggled. I know what it's like. So I want to make sure that our children have the education. If there's anything about which I feel more passionately, it is education. It is it. This is it. And we need to focus on those institutions that can give us the education, because right now the system is failing our children. Is failing our children systemically. It ain't happened just because of COVID. It happened before COVID. And where's the outrage? I get how those parents are feeling. I understand that. I did that. That's why I did De La Salle Academy for I don't know how many years, kids below 90% below the poverty line. George Jackson Academy for black and brown boys and girls, sitting on the board of New York Public Library to get Wi-Fi hotspots so our children who didn't have broadband could go do their homework. I've been in this. I've been focused on this. My words should be known by your deeds. I ain't hung out no slogan to say this is what I've done. I've been doing the work. I've been a private public servant. This is all about service, all about our children. If we don't stand up now, those kids are going to have the same, that crime rate that we're seeing, that poverty that we're seeing is only going to get worse. Ain't no calorie. Now is the time for us to stand up. I'm an outsider. I ain't got no slogans out there. I ain't managed by no press release. I've been judged by my results. And that's what I want New Yorkers to judge me on. And that's what I want those mothers and those fathers out there who struggle like my mother did. That's what I want you to hold me accountable for. And think about my truth. I don't have to worry about tomorrow what I told you today, because it ain't going to change. I am who I am. I'm here fighting for them, fighting for us, fighting for our future.
Pastor Mike?
I want to give you one more question before we wrap up.
Well, I wanted to make sure we addressed the faith-based question.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, Ray, if you're elected the 110th mayor of New York, and we're trying to be respectful of your time because I want to hear your closing statement. What's your proposal for substantive faith-based partnerships in the city? What would your mayoralty look like?
And let me add to that, Ray, because I said in the beginning that there are over 6,000 churches in New York City, and most of those have not been substantively engaged by administrations in the past, especially with regard to issues around mental health. For example, FCBC has one of the only mental health facilities created by a faith-based institution. Often faith-based institutions get marginal engagement. How would you look at faith-based institutions as a resource, and what kind of ideas would you do to engage them in tangible ways so that there's a deeper partnership between the administration and faith-based communities?
So you got to look at where we are institutionally in our city, in our country, in our neighborhoods. The only institution that served today the way that it served yesterday and will serve tomorrow is the church. I grew up in the church. I understand the role of the church. And for so long as those churches keep the mission that they have been anointed to have carried out, then they ought to be fundamental to the future. They have to be. And today, because there's no infrastructure other than the church, there's chaos. So I will rely heavily on the faith-based community. Those who are true to the word now, those who are true to the word, because this is a walk of faith, so I want to be clear about that. Working with you, Pastor Mike, and your leadership, I see what you've done in the mental health care area. I see what you've done in getting food out. I see what you've done in helping the elders out. We need to have those kind of partnerships. So I will go through and vet the leadership that is focused on doing that which is right, solely that which is right, which is what you're doing, Pastor Mike, and leading forward with the sole focus of what's in the best interest of the congregation and that which is leading you in your North Star. I need the faith-based community. I need to rely heavily on the faith-based community. And those institutions which have been the foundation to the Black and brown communities, I'm going to rely heavily. Going to be at the table with me, helping me to make decisions. Listen, I ain't interested in no prayer breakfast, made with bacon and eggs. That ain't who I am. You come there once a year, you do a prayer breakfast, everybody have prayer and go away until the next year and pray that it was a good year. We need people on the ground. Helping our people out. That's what I'm about.
Thank you for that, Ray. I'm grateful that you stayed, and we respect for your time. But I want to give you an opportunity to give your closing comments. We know you have a hard stop, but I want you to give an opportunity to give closing comments.
Listen, I would tell that to you, which is that which my mother says when I told her I was going to 95-year mother, then 94. And we talked about why I was doing. I said, it's a city that I love, Mom. It gave me everything, as you know. And we went over the scripture that when the foundation is crumbling, what will the righteous do? So at this point in time, we got to step up. We have to step up because ain't no Calvary coming. Ain't no plan B. And today we're at a dangerous intersection with integrity and competence or incompetence all on the ballot. And unless we step forward and help our people out and have a leadership in whom this city can trust and in whom this city believes, who's got a proven track record of managing large, complex organizations, for whom this is not their first job, who in the neighborhood has receipts, unless we do that, we're going back to the same. As I said, it's a bad movie and we're facing a disaster sequel. I got a proven track record of getting things done. I'm a doer. I ain't a talker. And I need your support. I need your votes at rayformayor.com. But importantly, maybe even more importantly, Pastor Mike, I'm going to ask y'all to do what my mother asked me to do over my family every night. And that's to pray the blood. Pray the blood over me and my family, and pray the blood for me over this journey, because it's a journey that unless we get it right, we're going to be in the wilderness for a long time to come.
Thank you, Ray. We appreciate you being with us tonight, and thank you for taking time. And we will continue to make sure we create opportunities for the people to be informed about the candidates. And thank you for sharing for the time we had tonight. We really appreciate that time.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate y'all.
All right.
Thank you.
Well,
that was lively.
Yes. And we are continuing this conversation. We're grateful for Diane Morales and Ray McGuire. But what were your thoughts, Dr. Greer?
Well, I really do wish that we could have even more time. I know we're in a privileged position to only have just 2 candidates tonight, 3 candidates tomorrow. But quite honestly, everything they said, I had 3 follow-up questions for. So, for example, when Ray McGuire talks about summer jobs, we know that when the late, great Marion Barry created summer jobs in Washington, D.C., crime decreased, young Black men, Dave Chappelle, actor Jeffrey Wright, they were recipients of that summer jobs program. We know that it really lifted full communities, especially for Black people in a chocolate city, because they were able to have their own money in their pocket. I think that that's a fantastic program. I want to know, how will that be implemented? What do we have to take from one part of the budget to put in another part of the budget to make sure, if, just like Marion Barry did, any child over 16, right? 16, 17, 18, I think that was the age group that he had, was a guaranteed summer job. I want to know what that looks like. When he says that, it's on his watch, he wants to make sure, by third grade, everyone's reading. Well, if that doesn't happen, then what do we do? Because we already know that Black children are tracked at a young age. So are we just going to keep our Black children in third grade until they get it right? I mean, are they going to get left back? Because we know that Black children are targeted. We know that they're seen as threats by certain teachers, even when they're 5 years old in kindergarten. So what, besides the tutoring corps, what is the real holistic plan to make sure that we get these children from pre-K all the way through high school with standardized tests and the Common Core and dealing with Albany and the governor? So I want to just, I would still want to hear more about the actual implementation. And similarly with Diane Morales, when it comes to policing or sort of, her care economy, what is her real foundation and skill set to help us think about how she would manage the money and the people and the really complex ideas? Because she tends to be, and this is not my opinion, this is what she said, she's more to the left of most of New York. So how do you take your values as someone who's a progressive politician when the majority of the city actually isn't on the side of the political spectrum that you're on? So those are the things that I think we could have talked about for hours.
No, yeah, and I think one of the things, one of our members made a comment. Summer youth employment programs in the city almost function like a lottery. It is not a guarantee. And the problem is, and I can speak as one who came through a program, often those who benefit are those who have access, but those who are the most underserved don't get access. So you kind of recycle the tentacles of poverty, and you don't create meaningful programs to actually reach the heart of the communities that are suffering the most. And that becomes problematic. And as you talked about with Diane Morales, with regard to police, I heard nothing specific. I think what we've been bombarded with throughout this campaign in so many ways are beautiful platitudes and short on programming. Great generalizations, but short on specifics. And I hope those who are watching tonight really, really heard that. You almost had to fight through the answers to get the specifics of how these things would be done. And I think that becomes the problem. I think many elected officials and persons who are running for office, what they've learned is just how do I increase my stump speech in ways that resonates without giving any meat whatsoever. And that was what I think becomes problematic for so many viewers. And think about this. We had two candidates, basically about 45 minutes, right? And when you see the debates, they have 30 seconds here, 45 seconds here. We had two candidates who had an opportunity. We did not stop them intentionally to express themselves. And when you heard some of the expressiveness, we still didn't get to the core of their programs, the programs we talked about, the issues we talked about. We still didn't get an idea and a sense of, well, what does this mean? And then I think the other part that none of the candidates are talking about, and we'll see tomorrow, but this idea of how do you maximize the faith-based community and ways to address these issues. Often the faith-based communities are not invited to the table, right? To have these, and these are the people who face the
closest to the issues, the closest to the problems. These are the people who have counsel with New Yorkers who come into your office to tell you exactly what is going on in their families. They're talking about education. They're talking about poverty. They're talking about concerns about their jobs. They're talking about the healthcare system. So you are a vessel for information that you could give to the 110th mayor of New York City.
Yeah. And they come looking for resources, which most of our, listen, I'm going to say this. The average African-American congregation in the United States is about 150 members, okay? We're blessed at FCBC. But even with that, we still don't have the kind of resource. We get every week people who come to us who are on the verge of being evicted, who don't know how to pay for lights, who don't have access to food because of food insecurity. We see these things on a regular basis. And so when you have these institutions that are the eyes and ears of the community, But elected officials don't see those institutions as opportunities to not just to talk to, but plan with on how to address these issues. It is a missed opportunity across the board.
I mean, I understand that we're less than 2 weeks away, and so I want to reiterate that early voting starts on Saturday, June 12th. The election day is June 22nd. That's a Tuesday. Keep in mind, if you decide to early vote, that location is oftentimes not the same location as your regular polling station. So you might want to go to, I just want to put this out here so we can make sure they do it, findmypollsite.vote.nyc to make sure if you all want to participate in this election, which I hope you do, you can. But I understand that nobody knows the job until they get in the job, right? To become mayor of New York City is an incredibly difficult job. It's a lot of us with a lot of competing interests. But I still want to hear more specifics about education, about how you will deal with the police. We know that this is a paramilitary organization. We know that there are a lot of Black people in the police. We know that there are a lot of Black families that rely on the NYPD as an entree into the middle class. That's fine. So how are we going to take all of this, and also the PBA, though, that supported and endorsed Donald Trump? How do you as a mayor plan to work with those individuals, right? Some who will be great and some who will turn their back on you from day one before you even say anything. How are we going to get this economy up and running post-COVID? How are we going to work small businesses, people who are leaving the city, businesses that are leaving the city? I just want a granular understanding of what your tenure will look like as mayor.
Tragically, I don't know if we will get that, even in the debates and even these conversations. That's why I encourage people who are watching, don't just take tonight's format and say, hey, take tonight's format and say, yes, let me look a little bit deeper into the platform and policy of the candidates.
Yes.
Don't focus on personality, who can outspeak who can out-yell who, right? Who tries too hard. I mean, and at some point, those who are watching, the voters, have to do the due diligence and dig a little deeper, because the truth is there are 8 candidates. There has not been one debate, and I'm being very honest, not one debate that has been televised where you walk away with a sense of, I know where he stands. I know where she stands. I get what they're trying to do. Because you can hear someone talk, as we've seen tonight, for an extent beyond 30 seconds, beyond 45 seconds, and it becomes a recycle every 30 seconds of what was said the first 30 seconds.
Well, you know, I always say this to my students, and I'll say this to my FCBC community. When people say, well, I'm so busy, right? I get that a lot. Oh, you know, Professor Greer, I would do it, but I'm so busy. But you can tell me what Portia did on The Real Housewives of Nowheresville last week. You can tell me everything that's going on Netflix, but you can't tell me what's going on with every single candidate. And so I would say we must invest at least 5 minutes a day. And this goes beyond election season. Invest, and I'm using that word deliberately, invest at least 5 minutes a day for your own political education. And if you feel so moved, you can think about political tithing to invest in the political institutions and the candidates who you want to see succeed on a consistent basis, not just during election season. Because if we only tune in during election season, they only tune into us during election season. We got to keep our foot on the gas. And all of these candidates have websites. All of them have robust websites where they have sections where it's education and COVID and jobs and crime. And so we can make an informed decision. And as you said, that's not based on personality politics, but it's based on policies that are hopefully much more detailed in white papers and much more, larger paragraphs that we can understand and really think about.
Listen, I'll follow that up with this. There are responsibilities we bear. Elections, and you know this line, elections have consequences. What we saw during the tenure of Donald Trump was the consequences that come with elections, right? We are in crisis in New York City. I know that no one wants to always say that directly, but we're in crisis, right? And financially, socially, culturally, and most definitely politically. And so we need to be thinking about who can best lead this city in a time of crisis, not out of the crisis, but in, because you're not going to become mayor and lead us out immediately. So leadership in, and then plans to lead us out of the crisis. But what it takes, and I say this often, and I know you do too, what we have to do is make sure that we maintain sustained engagement with electoral politics. Sustained engagement. It has to become part of our cycle of engagement. These right here, I tell everybody at FCBC, these phones right here are not just used to play games. You can research, you can get information, you can find out what's at stake. You can find out what Diane Morales was talking about with the NYPD budget. What was Ray talking about with his numbers? And you gave us the answer, but we can do that work. It is that critical. My fear is that because we are suffering from political exhaustion,
Yes.
and we're experiencing a collective exhale after 4 years of Donald Trump, that people will sit by. And let's not forget to add how many of our people are confused by ranked choice voting, right? So you have all these different pieces to this right now that can become combustible politically. And when they become combustible politically, what happens is radical disengagement.
Yes. And there's a political apathy that we have right now. First of all, we know that many parents are still dealing with trying to wrap up the school year. Now we're asking you to vote in June and not September, right? Some people are still dealing with COVID, either themselves, a loss of a loved one from COVID, a loss of a job because of COVID, and so the financial constraints or the emotional trauma that they're suffering. Doesn't seem like this election is that big of a deal. And I think you were absolutely correct. When we think about the trauma that was induced on us in the past 4 years, many people see these candidates as, well, they're Democrats and none of them are horrible, right? At the end of the day, all of them want to be good public servants. So I can sit this one out because no one is egregious, right? You don't have a Donald Trump on the ballot, and so I'm fine. That's not the case, though, because not only do we need someone to lead us through the storm and out of the storm, they have to have a vision while we're in it so that once we get out of it, we're not all looking around like, hey, so what do we do now? What's happening now? Because our children cannot afford to have a lack of leadership when it comes to their education, their job prospects, the safety of our streets. I think that the importance is we can give a challenge to ourselves. And in the next 12 days, because that's all we have, in the next 12 days, to find out as much as you can about a candidate, to talk to your family members and neighbors about candidates and see who's ranking whom 1 through 5. And last but not least, to come up with a voting plan. If you don't plan on voting early, you can vote on June 22nd. Polls are open 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. But what is your plan? What happens if you get there and there's a line and you still have to go to work? Do you go after work? I mean, walk yourself through your exact plan. Look at your ballot. There are so many ways. When you go to the website that I mentioned, the findmypollsite.vote.nyc, you can also, when you put in your address, it shows you your ballot. You can look to see what your ballot looks like so you're not caught off guard. There were judges on my ballot that I didn't know were going to be on my ballot. So I actually already did the research beforehand, so I didn't have to make a guess when I get into the voting booth. So I'm prepared to know what my comptroller options look like, what my public advocate options look like, what my mayoral options look like, what my city council options look like, and what my judge options look like.
Yeah, I think I looked at a comment from one of the members and said that it has been a fatal flaw on our part, trusting Democrats to be more human than Republicans. Yes, that is a flaw on some levels, but here's what we have to do. We know, and I tell this, when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were elected, I said that when we voted, we did not elect messiahs. We elected flawed human beings to lead us. Here's the thing. We're not looking for a messiah in New York City, but we do need someone who can lead in ways where we understand what they actually are seeking to do. And you use the correct word. What is the vision you have? What is the vision? Simple things. I mean, you're in the academy. So I've heard no one say things. Think about it. We have empty buildings. People have left the city, right? Small businesses have closed. I've heard no one use language like, how do we reimagine the urban landscape in New York City? right? Those kinds of conversations are not even on the table. But those are the conversations that have to happen if we're truly going to elect someone who can lead us out of this crisis. So, you know,
I will say this though, Pastor Mike, I was encouraged. The little bit of vision I did see was when Ray said we can get retired teachers and students who can get a college credit to become tutors. That actually, I perked up and I was like, see, this is the type of vision I need more specifics on. If we need to tutor, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, then right, why can't we team up with the CUNY system and help people who are, getting their EDDs or in an education track? Why can't we give them a course credit to tutor and sort of think about the synergy between early childhood education and higher ed? Why can't we give a little bump to seniors who are retired, a little bump on their pension, or if for those seniors who don't have pensions, give them a little stipend if they are going to be tutors? Because we know for a fact young people need old people and older people, our seniors, need young people, right? Young people will keep our seniors alive, and younger people need to hear those stories. When they're tutoring, they're going to exchange ideas and sort of build relationships in the community. I think that's a way that we can think about a new vision. But I want to hear that when it comes to policing, when it comes to housing, when it comes to jobs. I need more of that.
Yeah, no. I think we've said it, and we've said it numerous times. I think we're in a moment where we need specifics. And as you said, when Ray said that was an idea, but the problem, here's one of the challenges, that when we have these formats, no matter whether it's this format or debate, everybody's so quick with sound bites and running them off quickly that they never think, okay, here are the 3 things that I think are critical ideas that can impact this area, be it education, housing. For example, in Ray's platform, if you go to the website, which I encourage everyone to do, to go to Ray McGuire's website and Diane Morales' website, he talked about reducing construction costs for affordable housing. How will you reduce construction costs for affordable housing? So we need to raise these questions, I think, individually and try to find these answers on their website. So,
and lastly, Pastor Mike, I do want to say, some people still have questions about what exactly ranked choice voting is. If the FCBC family goes on YouTube, just go on YouTube. This is your 5 minutes a day of research. If you just type in ranked choice voting, there are lots of videos and cartoons to help walk you through right on the phone, right? To help walk you through how exactly does it work? I'm ranking people 1 through 5. Like, how does my first choice candidate not ultimately win? What does that mean in a city where we might have almost 1 million people voting for mayor of New York City?
Absolutely. Well, this was round 1 tonight. Tomorrow, we have with us Andrew Yang, Maya Wiley, and Catherine Garcia. And I want the viewers to pay attention to what are the specific plans and the specific vision on the various issues that we will cover on tomorrow night. We know an hour wasn't enough, but in this political climate, it is hard to get candidates to stay beyond an hour. Wish they would, but it is difficult. But we're grateful for those who came tonight. And I am most appreciative to you, Dr. Greer, for agreeing to be a part of this for 2 nights and taking the time. And we are grateful for you and for your commitment to this work. And not just here, what you do for this city and what you do in this country, because you seek to inform us on a regular basis of our political options and also the political choices we have to confront if we're going to move forward. So thank you for the night. And you all who watched tonight, I hope you heard what you needed to hear. But more than that, you probably didn't. You probably didn't hear everything you needed to hear. But that is why it becomes important for you to go to the website of these candidates and read through. You can do that. As Dr. Gregg gave a method, take 5 minutes, 5 minutes a day, just 5 minutes a day. We waste more time than that doing nothing throughout the day. 5 minutes every day to research this process, research the candidates, find out what ranked choice voting is about so you can make an informed decision about who becomes the 110th mayor of New York City. Well, tomorrow night, 7 p.m., right back here. Please tell friends, tell everyone to hear, because it's going to be exciting and interesting on tomorrow night. And we look forward to that. So until we meet again, on behalf of myself and Dr. Christina Greer, have an amazing night. God bless. And we will see you all tomorrow. Peace.
Friday night politics. You can't beat it.
Friday night politics. Take care, everybody.